And welcome back. Welcome back to the channel, and more importantly, hope everyone's having a good day. Well, you can see we got a selection of more AMS oil products, as you've probably seen in some of my other previous videos, I should say. We've kind of switched over a lot of our lubrication needs over to AMS oil, and today is no different. Well, what you see that we have on the lift today, we're actually in the garage. We're going to be doing some service work on our HellCat. Now, this is a 2019 HellCat with a 6-speed manual, so a little bit of a rarity there. But what we're getting ready to do, as you can obviously see, is just do an oil change on it. And while we're doing the oil change, I'm going to add in a couple of these oil valves. Now, these it's kind of maybe a love-hate thing when it comes to these valves, and a lot of individuals / opinions. Now, I've used these on the Rams, as if you've seen them in my previous videos. I've used them for years and they've held up fine. Now, I have done quite a bit of digging over the internet to find if anybody else is using these valves with a HellCat, because we're going to put one on the oil pan and one on the oil cooler. If you don't already know, these HellCats have an oil cooler, which is located up front, and they have a drain plug in them as well. So they get, drain plug gets pulled and they get drained as well as the oil pan, but I'll show you all that when we get to it. Now, I have found quite a few postings online of individuals doing this, and they seem to not have an issue with them. Now, it does have a belly pan underneath, as I'll show you, so these valves actually will get covered up and protected, so I'm not worried with the car being low-lying to the ground that it is, any road debris kind of coming up and hitting these valves, potentially breaking them, and or potentially, able to push up on these clips and open them up. Again, I've run these on other applications for years and not had a problem with it, but I wanted to show you kind of a selection here. Now, there is an individual online, which I will link his video in the description below to give credit where credit is due. This is the one he chose to run on his oil pan. That is the F106N. You see it's an M14 by 1.5 thread pitch, and it has a kind of a medium-sized snout on it, if you want to call it that. Now, also to show you basically the stub nose version, which you've seen me run this on trucks before. This is the one I would normally run. So on the oil pan, we can either run this snub nose one, or we can run this one with a longer, and you can also get a shorter version of this valve in this same thread pitch. It's really up to kind of what you want to run. So once we get underneath there and look, I'll have a look at it. We'll either run this one or the flat face one here, the snub nose. Now, the nice thing about these is that you can put a piece of tubing on this snout. I think this is 3/8 if I remember correctly, and that just kind of helps, an additional help with the oil change. The primary reason why I am using these is that they allow a little bit easier time draining the oil. You're not having to crack the oil plug loose and then put it back in again. And I know, I get it. The argument can be made, if you've got to crawl up underneath and take the belly pan off of this vehicle, for example, why not just remove the drain plug and put the original plug back in? Like I said, it adds a little bit more convenience factor to it. And for the oil cooler, it is a slightly different thread pitch from what I can find online. Ignore the sticker that somebody put over there. That's the incorrect part number. The part number on the part in the bag is correct. It is a F137S. You can see it's an M12 by 1.75. And we got a couple of these rubberized caps here. What we're going to do with these caps, we're going to put one on that little stub snout that you see there. And if we elect to go with this one on the oil pan, then we'll put a cover on this as well. And that's just to help any keep any debris from getting in there and potentially clogging it up. Even if you were to use these and not put the covers on them, I think it'll be just fine, at least in this particular application for an example, because again, it's got a belly pan that covers up the oil pan, the oil filter, and of course the oil cooler is also covered up by the front bumper. So I think there's pretty much a little bit of a likelihood, although it's not impossible, but not much of a likelihood of getting any debris on these. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to get up underneath and change that out. And we're going to go ahead and we got our Blackstone Labs kit here. We're going to go ahead and grab an oil sample while we're at it to start tracking the health of this engine. Now, when we originally purchased this vehicle, up until this video, this point, we've always had the dealership kind of do the oil change on this. Well, since this is now kind of gotten a little bit up in age, and that oil change program that we purchased with this vehicle is kind of coming to an end, then we're going to go ahead and just start taking over the oil changes on our own. Now, this uses the same oil that you see me use in our 1500 and our 2500 and those videos. It also uses this same EA011 oil filter that is actually used in our 1500 that you saw me use on our other project vehicle, otherwise known as Candy Apple, and I'll link those project vehicles down below in the description as well. So the first thing we're going to do is get it up here on the lift a little bit higher so we can kind of squeeze ourselves underneath here, and we'll start taking the belly pan off and getting the oil pan filter and of course the oil cooler exposed so we can start draining our oil. Now, what I like to do, and it's just me, is that you can see that we've got the fill cap already taken out. And I usually like to put that on the hood release just so somebody can't close the hood without hitting this. And of course, we've got our dipstick just kind of pulled out and kind of laid over to the side here. Again, just as visual indicators in case we walk away and come back and somebody else walks up behind us and attempts to start it. This will hopefully be a pretty good deterrent to get them to realize that, oh, it still needs engine oil added to the vehicle. So let me get this up a little bit higher. Let me get some shop lights underneath here, and then we will get to work on this. And hopefully the video looks okay. It looks okay in the viewfinder. In a previous video, just to give you some additional information, this GoPro fell forward and cracked the old protective lens that was in front of the camera lens, and we've since replaced that. It looks okay. I guess I'll tell more in editing, but if you see any stray artifacts in it, I do apologize, but that's probably why. Well, that being said, let me get this up a bit more and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So just to show you what we've got going on here, we're underneath. This is obviously our belly pan or our lower engine cover, I guess would be another way of calling it. And you can see each one of our bolts here, and these look to be probably maybe 8 or 10 millimeter, have an arrow set next to them. So we've got to buzz these out, and I'll just use a small 1/4" set. These shouldn't be in very tight. That will allow us to move this, and that will at least then expose the oil drain plug and the oil filter. Now the oil cooler should be up in this area here, and what I'm looking, let me get you some light. There we go. So what I'm looking at here is once we get this cover off, and that'll give me a better idea of what we need to get off in order to get to that oil cooler, once we can find out where it's potentially stashed. But at least for this first part of the cover, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like we got 4 fasteners, and this cover will then slide backwards and then drop down. So let me get these fasteners out of here, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, as you can see, we got the first cover off, and yes, once you have all 4 of those bolts out, that cover will just slide straight back and then down, and you can see that cover just sitting on the oil pan here. And yes, we will take the opportunity to clean all this dirt up before we put it back up in place. But, and we'll cover this more when we can get this old filter out of here, and I'll show it to you. If you recall, you probably already noticed it. You'll notice that oil filter doesn't look the correct size. That oil filter that they put on here, and then this was the last. This has always been changed at the dealership up to this point. You'll notice that is smaller and longer. Now, it threw me for a loop, to be honest with you. I checked several websites to make sure that the oil filter I ordered was the correct one for this vehicle, and I have the correct one. However, when I run the part number for this one, it does fit quite a few Chrysler vehicles, but it is not rated or listed, I should say, for a supercharged 6.2. It is not listed for any of the Hellcats. So I'm not pointing fingers and saying the dealership did something they shouldn't have done. This may be a perfectly acceptable substitute for the filter that should be on here, but this part number on this filter does not cross to this vehicle. That's what I'm saying. Again, I don't have a crossover listing for Mopar parts that this may be perfectly acceptable. But either way, the filter we ordered, the one you saw me earlier, the AMS oil filter, the EAO11, I believe it was, is the correct, EAO11. I got it right behind my head here. EAO11 is the correct one, the size that is supposed to be on here, not this one. But again, we'll get into more of that when I drop that off, and I will save this, and when this goes in for its annual inspection, I'm going to bring this with me to the service manager and ask why this filter was put onto this vehicle. Again, it's more for curiosity. If this is an acceptable cross, so be it. If not, oof. I mean, obviously it was clearly at least filtering oil and allowing oil to circulate, because we haven't had any drivability issues, thankfully. But either way, bottom pan's off. Now, in order to get to the oil cooler, which is up in this general area here, we're going to have to take the second skirt off, and it looks like what we're dealing with is just push pins. We got about 3 push pins on the sides of driver and passenger wheel well sides here, 3 push pins in the front, and we've got some additional push pins in the front here, and it looks like this whole piece, much like this first cover, will just slide back and then down, and then we'll have access to get to that oil cooler nut. So let me work on getting these push pins out of the sides and across the front, and then we'll see about dropping down this air duct piece and get to the rest of what we need. So let me get working on that, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our front cover taken off, and we will take the opportunity, just like on our other cover, just give you some light here, sorry, and we'll get all that dirt cleaned out of there before we, dirt and rocks and stuff that like accumulate inside these belly pans, we'll get all that out of there before we reinstall. But also what I want to point out, apologies, is that along with the push clips you saw me point out earlier for this front cover, you got 5 bolts or 5 fasteners that go across the front of this cover that secure it to the kind of the front facade or front bumper cover lip here. In case you're curious, you can see those there. They run from, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 again across the front. And those are let me get you the size here. I need light. I need light. Apologies. I should have looked at this before I started the camera back up, but I didn't. 7mm, there we go. That took long enough. But over here, You can see we had access to what we need, which is the drain plug for the oil cooler assembly. Now, to get the Fumoto valve to fit into that, a lot of individuals, and I've kind of already started the process, have had to take this oil feed line that goes it's one of the feed lines that goes into the cooler, whether it's the input or the output, I'm not sure, but the far one here, you can see how close that runs to that drain plug. So it doesn't give you the room you need to kind of spin that Fumoto drain valve in place because of the mechanism that kind of sticks out the side of it. So what a lot of individuals done, and what we're going to do here is we're just going to pull that loose real quick, kind of swing that off out of the way, and that'll give us the space we need. Now you'll see a little plastic retaining cover that I've already taken off. Now inside of there is a little C-clip. Much like you've seen me do in other videos, the same type of C-clip that usually is on kind of transmission lines, or at least Chrysler transmission lines. And it's sitting in a little groove inside of here, and once we get the oil drained and we get that clip out, we can get that line out. Now you just want to be careful when you put that line back in that it's nice and clean when it goes back in, and that clip seats correctly. Otherwise, this pipe could potentially come out of the oil cooler and you're going to be left with quite a bit of mess. But we're going to get to that here in a little bit. Once we get the initial oil drained, then we'll worry about getting this piece out. But for now, we're going to get our drain plug knocked loose. Go ahead and get the oil draining out of here. Again, we'll get this filter out of here, and then once we get this all wrapped up and I can get out from underneath the vehicle, then we'll kind of go over what this part number looks like. There's some more light for you. What this part number looks like versus the part number that should be on here. And I will save, like I said, I will save this filter, and I'm going to bring it into the service manager down there next time we go in for an annual inspection, which is getting close. And I want to get their opinion of it. Like I said, I'm not pointing this out to say they did something wrong. This could be internally for them a 100% acceptable cross between oil filter part numbers. But again, we shall see, and if I get an update on that, then I'll put that into a future video. But with that being said, I'm just going to get the oil drained out of here. I'll bring you back once that drain is complete and we go to install the Fumoto valve. I won't show you the actual drain process because it's pretty much like draining any other oil you've seen in any of my other videos. But again, once we get that drained out and get ready to put the Fumoto in, I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our drain plug out and we're just kind of letting things continue to drip. And while that's just pretty much down to nothing at this point, again, like I said, we'll let it drip. And what we're focused on now is our oil cooler, which is, again, kind of over here in the corner on the passenger side. Now, one thing to be mindful of when you crack this bolt loose is you see that entire assembly's loose. It's I don't want to say it's not secure, but it's not very rigid, but it's kind of deliberate because you got to think, with the vehicle moving around and the body articulating, you kind of don't really want this very rigidly mounted. Otherwise, you could break the cooler or one of these lines. So when you go to break this bolt loose back here, be mindful you're going to want to grab probably this area right in here where you got these nice big meaty flat spots to hold this assembly in place while you break this bolt loose. That way you don't potentially damage something while trying to get that bolt loose. What I'm going to use is just a big old honking crescent wrench like this on those flats while I get a normal wrench on that drain plug bolt. And I'll just kind of work these wrenches against one another, if that makes sense. In other words, where I'm holding this in place, but also kind of using it to give us a little bit of additional leverage so I could work the wrenches against one another to help crack that free. And in case you're curious, yes, that is a different size from the drain plug bolt. The drain plug bolt on this particular HellCat was 13 millimeter. And this bolt right here, let me just make sure I got the right wrench here. Yep. For the oil cooler bolt is 15 millimeter. And just to let you know, I did kind of hit this a little bit off camera, and that bolt was actually, to my surprise, fairly loose. It took almost no effort on my part to get that thing to crack free, so I don't see any other witness marks on it, but that's not to say this bolt hasn't been replaced. But I'm curious if when the dealership does oil change, I'm sorry, I got your turn still. I'm curious when the dealership did the oil changes on this, if they ever took this section off and even drained that oil cooler. Like I said, I'm not looking to make it a debate in the comments as to whether you should or shouldn't do that. But it does say in the instructions for the oil change to crack that loose and let that drain. Either way, what I'm going to do is get a container up there, finish taking this bolt out, let that drip, and then we'll when I bring it back, we'll quickly review the instructions for this, because they get rather specific on what they consider this to be drained. So like I said, we're going to hold it here, get a wrench on it, work the wrenches against one another. We'll get that broken free, so we'll get that out the rest of the way, get a container on there, and get this draining, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. You can see that we've got our drain plug out of our oil cooler and just draining into a container here. And yes, this is an approved container for use, available in most kitchens anywhere. You just don't want to bring it back in the kitchen, reuse it, so it'll remain out here specifically, at least for this purpose. But as you can see, after, and it's probably been maybe about 10-15 minutes, we do get a fair bit of oil that does accumulate and drip out of that cooler, which brings us to our instructions. Now, granted, these instructions are from All Data, but you can see even they state that once you get the drain plug out of the oil cooler, to allow the oil to drain until there's one drip every second, approximately 5 minutes. So it took a little bit longer in our case to get down to that level. Now, the next item that we're going to do, not to spark a debate in the comments below, is we're going to go ahead and get that oil filter replaced. Now, typically in the past, until recently, and if you may have saw, I made a comment about this when we were working on the red Ram, that normally I would not pre-fill the oil filters. I just spin them on, fill the engine full of oil, start it up, and away you go. And then I started to pre-fill the oil filters when working on the red Ram, and I've done it on the other vehicles ever since. And the reason why that is, and I'll put a link in the description below, as well as it should pop up on the right-hand corner of the screen here, to a oil channel called, I believe it's the Motor Oil Geek, if I remember correctly. And he developed engine oil formulas for Joe Gibbs Racing. And he has a video out there that you'll see in which they used an engine and a dyno, and they did a series of oil tests and sent them to the lab, in which they took oil samples from this same engine when they pre-filled versus didn't pre-fill the oil filter. And in the cases where he didn't pre-fill the oil filter, he was able to show via lab results significantly higher amounts of wear metals in the oil. And normally what I used to say in the past was, if the instructions didn't say to pre-fill the oil filter, then I normally wouldn't do it. But however, regardless of what the instructions say now, I do pre-fill them. But what I wanted to show you here, and I thought this was rather interesting, is that you'll see here on step 11, we'll get you in closer, it says fill the new oil filter with fresh engine oil, and then thread the oil filter onto the oil adapter. And sorry, the step before that was putting some oil in the gasket of the filter, pre-filling it with engine oil, and then installing it. So in this case, and granted this is All Data's instructions, but at least in this set of instructions, they've now started to also state pre-filling the filter, engine filter, with engine oil. So that's what we're going to do here. Now I'm going to use that filter that I showed you earlier, that EAO-11, because it is the correct one spec'd for this vehicle. But like I said, when we get everything kind of buttoned up towards the end of the video, what I'll do is I'll get a fresh EAO 11 from AMSOIL and let you compare it with the one they had on this vehicle and just kind of show you the differences. So with that being said, let me go ahead and tackle the filter, and then once we get that filter changed out, I'll bring you back and we'll start getting our Fumoto valves installed. And you can see that on our old cooler here, probably about after 15 minutes, we're down to, you know, probably maybe one drop every, 2 to 3 seconds. So we're well within our margin to go ahead and start buttoning that up. With that being said, let me work on this oil filter and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got our filter installed, and you can see it does fit just fine. And I'll show you. This is the old one uninstalled that you see here. You can diameter wise, it's much smaller. It's about the same height, not quite. But it obviously had the same sealing pattern and flow pattern. But I'll show you the difference. The difference is that you got a much bigger inlet here, the outer edges where your oil flows in and then comes out of the center, than what the one that they had in here will do. By the way, we'll cover that a bit more later. Normally what I like to do, and of course if you've watched any of my other videos, I always date and put the current date and the current mileage on my filters. I'm sorry I got you upside down. So yes, this is a 2019 HellCat, believe it or not, that only has about 2,350 miles on it, as you can see here. But normally, once the gasket seats up against the flange, I'll do like you see me what I've done here, where I'll take one of the edges of the filter and just kind of hit it with a silver Sharpie. And I can watch that as an indication in order to do my 3/4 turn or so from the minute the gasket makes contact. Again, it just gives a nice visual aid so you kind of know how far you've turned it. And again, that is done hand tight. That is not done with an oil filter wrench. And that's all they need to be, is just kind of put on hand tight. No need to go, full on ugga-duggas on those. So what I'm looking at now is getting this drain plug replaced with one of the Fumoto plugs. And I think what I'm going to do is go with the stubby one. Once I can figure out what I did with it. I've got it underneath here somewhere. There it is. This is the stubby one here that doesn't have the long or the short snout on it. Just to show you that part number there again. And the reason why I'm going to go with this one is, and I know this will clear because I've seen others do this, but you see the long snout one there. If I kind of just hold it up to the oil pan here, it gets pretty close to this rack and pinion assembly. It's not going to hit it, and it looks like it would still clear it, but if we ever had to service that rack and pinion, then they would have to take the snout off that valve or take the valve out altogether. And since there is kind of a belly pan that does sit here, or a lower engine cover, I guess would be a better way to call it, that sits here, I'm going to go ahead and just put in again that snub one. This is the one that I've used in several other vehicles in the past, and it's worked fine. So I'm going to work on getting that installed. Now, Fumoto, in their install instructions, they don't reference using any thread sealant on their website, so I'm not going to use any here, and I've installed them before without using thread sealant, and they've been fine. It does come with a gasket, as you can see there on the back of the valve, for the sealing aspects. Now, the book says 20 foot-pounds for this drain plug bolt and for the oil cooler bolt. Fumoto says, I think it's a 1/8 to 1/4 turn after their gasket makes contact, they want you to snug it up to, and it says and or up to torque specifications for the valve. And if you go to their website and look at the actual model number of the valve you're using, they've got a torque page on it. Now, don't quote me on it, but I want to say the F106s, Fumoto. I think they're about 18 foot-pounds, and if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I do apologize. Is it Fumoto or Fumoto? I think I keep saying Fumoto. Either way, you go to their website, you plug in the model number, and I think, like I said, don't quote me on it. You know, obviously, do your own research. I think it's 18 foot-pounds, and the actual manufacturer, Chrysler, for the actual oil pan bolt as well as the actual oil cooler bolt states 20. So we're going to get it in there. We're going to get it snugged up. And the other thing I'm going to look at as we're tightening this up is where this lever ends up. Just try to get it into a basically, you know, a nice position where, you know, it lessen the chance of it getting accidentally hit. But like I said, at least with the cover that's on here, the likelihood, even with this being as low line a vehicle as it is, I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but likelihood at least it lessens it a little bit since it does have a cover. So let me work on getting that valve installed, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our Fumoto valve installed. And what I'm going to do next is just kind of take this lever, pull it towards me. There it goes. It's a little stiff because it is a new valve. And you see that it kind of goes back down in place and clicks. But just to show you, what you would have to do in this case is push it forward towards the driver's side and then up to release the flow, and then back down. And there you go. You can see that kind of comes back down and locks. Now, just to make sure, since we're here and we can see it, yep. Hopefully you can see that in there, that shows, and I'll kind of show you how that works. Again, push down, out, that'll open it. Then we go back down a little bit more. You can see that that's in place, locked in. So it would take a pretty good, you know, like I said, I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but it would take a pretty good event to push that forward and then back towards the rear of the vehicle. Now they also give you this little lock tab here, and this will loosen up a little bit and be a bit easier to open and close as you use the valve. But you can see that this little plastic locking collar here has slotted on one side, and that's going to go where that's going to feed through where that lever is at. So if we just take this, kind of get it started again, hopefully you can see that. There we go. That just clips in place and helps serve as a lock to keep this from pushing forward to begin with. So now that we got that one in there, let's get you swung around, and then we're going to have to tackle this beast over here, but it's going to be the same process, but with the only difference being, you can see that we've pretty much stopped dripping at this point, or actually we've got one drip on there. We're probably down about one drip maybe every 5 or 10 seconds, which is more than enough. Again, we're going to have to get the clip out of this flared connection over here where it goes into the oil cooler, and temporarily just kind of wiggle this pipe out of here in order to get the room that we need to thread this in place. Now remember, this bolt here was a different thread pitch than what was in the oil pan, and I'll show you that here. Let me grab the right one. Sorry, I'm underneath the vehicle, so apologize for the camera angles. And once again, ignore that sticker. That sticker's wrong. It is a F137S. And you can see it's an M12 by 1.75. So I'm going to work on getting this one in place, and then I'll bring you back. It's going to be, you know, the same process as what we just looked at on the oil pan. Is just getting this valve in here, getting it tight, but then also getting it situated where we can kind of get the lever where we want. And what I would like to do, or what I want to see done, is, and I'll show you this other valve as an example. You see, you got this assembly here where you got the hardware that actuates and puts spring tension on that lever. I would like that to not be up against this pipe. I would like it to kind of be out over here, going towards the rear of the vehicle. That way, you know, we don't have to worry about this pipe, you know, rubbing into that valve and causing an issue. So again, we'll just have to get it on there and take a look at it and make sure that we get it the positioning where we want it, and then go from there. And with that being said, let me concentrate on this and I'll bring it back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our line out of our oil cooler, and more oil will dump out of this bottom line here once you get it detached. So be mindful of that. But you can see we got our clip out, obviously, because our line is out. And if you've ever dealt with these and seen them on transmission lines, this is just a bigger version of the exact same clip. You can, I found it easier on this one because the clip kind of faces this direction inside this unit, is to work on getting this top one picked up and rotated out. And you can grab a hold of these ears pretty easily with a pocket screwdriver. And then once it's rotated out, then concentrate on getting the bottom one free. Because you can see there's not a lot of room. You can see where my finger's at between the top of this housing here, where this top of this clip is going to be at, and the rest of the structure of the oil cooler. So like I said, it was easier to kind of get the pocket screwdriver in the top here, get this one up and out, rotate it a little bit, and then get the bottom one to release. Once it was released, just wiggle the pipe a little bit back and forth. Just be gentle with it, and it will normally come out of its seat. And now that we have that out of the way, you can see that we can just push this pipe off to the side here, and we got plenty of room to spin our Fumoto in place. So I'm going to work on getting the Fumoto valve in here. The process is going to be the same as on the oil pan. Just like I said earlier, we just want to be mindful that we get the bigger piece of the Fumoto at least pointed out this way, or maybe just straight down, but we definitely just don't want it up against this other pipe here. So that being said, I'm going to concentrate on that, and then I'll bring you back. Now, as far as putting this pipe back in once we're ready, and I've done this before, you can either put this pipe in first and wiggle it and make sure it's seated, and then put your clip in, or you can try and put your clip in first and then push the pipe in afterwards. And then once you get the pipe past the little ridges that are going to hold on to it, you'll normally kind of hear it click in place. But you just want to make sure that you get that good and seated, and that it's good and locked in. Otherwise, it will cause a pretty good leak for you. But I'm going to concentrate on getting this valve in, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our valve in, and hopefully you can see the top of the valve there. So I went a little bit tighter, just a scooch tighter, more than I wanted, but I was able to get it to kind of get this little nub piece here, as you can see, to rotate towards the top. There's still plenty of room. There's a nice gap in there between the top of the valve and the bottom of the oil cooler. Matter of fact, I can still get my finger in there, so there's plenty of space. And just to rotate you upside down here, you can see there's our release valve there. So if I push up and then over, there we go, up and over. So this is going to be up and then towards the front of the car. This will open up and drain. And then if we just take it, rotate it back around, let it fall back in place, you may or may not hurt it, and that locks it back in. So just like with the other Fumoto valve, we got this nice little locking tab that we'll put in there next. And yep, that's the side that's got the split in it. Let's get that in there. Good. Okay, so that is now in place. That is now locked in. Now what I'm going to concentrate on next, and like I told you before, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to, when I get a few more cameras and some additional equipment, I'm going to try to get more live action shots rather than me just kind of doing it and bringing you back and showing you what it looks like. It's just incredibly cramped right here right now, and I'm just down to a single GoPro for now for filming. But I'm going to work on getting this pipe cleaned up, get the surfaces nice and clean, getting that pipe and our clip back in place. And again, just want to make sure that's nice and good and seated and kind of out of the way of everything. So let me get this pipe in, and I'll bring you back and I'll show you what it looks like with everything back in place. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, hopefully you can see that there. We got our pipe put back in place. We still need to put our little retention, our plastic retention collar that you see here, which helps hold our clip in and keeps the clip from coming out. Now, it may be a little hard for you to see this. I'll get you in close here. But one thing I like to do is take these clips, and I don't know if you can see that clip, I can kind of move it a little bit. So that tells me it's past the ridges on the pipe and everything's kind of snapped in place. So once we get this retention collar over that clip, we should be good to go. And you can see the valve here has plenty of space between it and the pipe next to it. There is a little bit of flex that this pipe can do, you can see, but it doesn't come close to hitting the side of that valve. Now, one thing I did have to do to show it to you here is omit the little plastic locking clip that goes around that lever, and that's because, let me get you straightened up here. When the clip is on and in this position, it has to go this way because there's our slot. This side of the clip is thick enough that it's sticking out, that it actually hits the side of this other oil cooler line. So I don't want this locking clip, the side of this locking clip, to potentially wear through that line. Now again, the way this valve is situated, if you remember, in order for it to unlock, you have to push up on it all the way and then swing it over. And remember, these levers are also spring-loaded. So they're spring-loaded to be held in the down position when they lock in place. So I think it'll be good for now. If it presents itself to be an issue, I'll definitely do a follow-up video and explain what's going on there. Now, one thing we may do if it does present to be an issue, or if we just decide that we need the extra warm and fuzzy, is that we can potentially, and I'll show you on the oil pan one here because it's a bit easier to see it. Let me get you some light. Is that we could take a tie wrap and tie wrap right across the top of the barrel, and that will add some resistance to further keep that lever from being pushed up and then over to unlock. But like I said, it does have a nice sturdy resting groove in it. It is spring-loaded to keep that lever down by default, so I think we'll be fine. But like I said, if it does present an issue, I'll bring you back. So I'm going to do one final fitment check on this pipe here, make sure that we're good and seated, get our cap, retaining cap back in place, and I'll bring you back and we'll put some oil in it. So one moment. And welcome back. So we got oil in the vehicle at this point. We're good on our dipstick for our measure for now. Now that will drop a little bit once we first start it and it finishes priming the oil filter. Again, we did pre-fill the filter, but I think we got about a half a quart in it, but it's going to be able to get a lot more in that filter, obviously, once the oil pump itself really starts to kind of push things in place. So what I'm going to do is when I bring you back, I'm going to get you situated probably somewhere in the rear of the vehicle just so you can hear the cold start. We'll start it up, obviously check for leaks, so let it run for a few minutes, then we'll power it down, let everything settle, and do one final oil check. But let me get you situated and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I got you on the lift right now, just kind of near the back passenger corner of the bumper here. Sorry for the view, but I get you pretty close to the exhaust. Now again, the camera is gonna clip this out quite a bit. It's not gonna do it justice, but in case you're curious, let's go do a cold start because it has been sitting in the garage for a while. Hence the need for the oil change. And we'll keep an eyeball on the pressure, check for leaks real quick, and I'll be right back. One moment. So I'm gonna let this run for a little bit, continue to check for leaks, and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we ran it for about 5 minutes. Just doing a visual. You can see that we've got absolutely no drips on the drain plug, or what is now the drain valve for the main oil pan. And also the drain valve for the oil cooler as well. So far so good. So no issue with it. Perfect. So what we're going to do is just continue to kind of let this settle now that it's been run for a little bit, and then we'll do one final check on the oil and top it off as necessary. But as promised, let me go grab one of these oil filters I was telling you about, and I'll show you the difference between, obviously the one you see there installed now and the one that was installed on here. So one moment. And welcome back. So just wanted to go full circle on this. Now this is the oil filter we took off. This is the one that was on the vehicle. This is the one the dealership did last. Now every oil change, other than the one starting now going forward from now forward to now to the end of time, we're going to do our own oil changes. But this is what was put on there at the last oil change. You can see that part number. Now this part number isn't listed as supporting a HellCat. Now it does support 6.4 RTs, several Chargers, Challengers, Jeeps, and many other Chrysler products. Now again, I'm not pointing this out to point shame at anyone or any particular business. This may be an acceptable thing to do, but just to show you the difference in the sizes of the filters. Now this filter is the same size as the proper OEM filter for this vehicle. And if we turn them over here just to show you a little bit, now this is where the oil goes in, is the outer edge here. It comes out of the center. Now you can see that this passageway here is much wider, so you got a greater lip here, and a little bit narrower of an opening, but same thread type on this particular filter. But again, you've got a lot more surface area here to kind of hold oil and guide oil in my opinion. And if we do this, you can kind of see that the filter that's supposed to be on here is a little bit bigger in diameter. And as far as the height, the factory filter, or the proper size filter, I should say, is just a little bit taller than this one here. But yeah, you can really see it there that this one is a pretty good deal smaller. Like I said, obviously it was working, it was sealing, it wasn't causing an oil leak, and the engine was getting sufficient amount of oil. So like I said, I'm going to hold on to this, and next time I go in there for some service work that they can do that I cannot do, such as a state inspection, I'm going to ask the service manager about this. Like I said, this could very well be an acceptable alternative if I've got any Mopar mechanics that perhaps watch this video. If you can make a comment below, that'd be awesome. So one other thing, just to kind of tidy things up here, in relation to, remember we did pre-fill this oil filter for reasons I stated earlier. Now if you'll notice the sticker here on the AMS oil filter kind of does the same thing. You see there have a symbol for what looks to be pre-fill there, another symbol for what looks to be lubing the seal before it goes onto the vehicle, and of course their instructions for once the gasket makes contact there, And the sticker's a little folded over, but you can see 3/4 of a turn there. So again, I'm not trying to say whether you should pre-fill your filters or whether you shouldn't. That's a decision for you. But just to show you that even the AMS oil filter says to pre-oil now, as well as the oil change instructions for this particular vehicle now state to pre-fill them as well. And once again, I will put that link below to the Motor Oil Geeks video, in which they did significant amounts of lab testing on pre-filling versus non-pre-filling. With that being said, the only thing left is to get those belly pans in place, so no need to bring you back for that. There's just me doing some cleanup and getting everything bolted back in. And we did get our oil sample, as you can see there in the bottle. We'll get that sent off to Blackstone Labs so they can kind of give us their opinion of what the contents of the oil look like for an engine that has a little over 2,000 miles on it. Now, the other reason for doing this is that every time we do an oil change going forward, we'll grab another oil sample, get that sent off, and we'll do that for the history of the vehicle. Because we want to do that in case we start to see internal issues. They're likely to show up in the oil in a lab test far before they become a major issue that you can noticeably hear, things of that nature. So with that being said, like I said, a little bit of a long video. I do tend to ramble. I do apologize for that. Hopefully you found this video useful. As you saw, knock on wood, no issues yet with the Fumoto drain valves. If that changes, I will definitely make an update. But with that being said, if you have not subscribed, please consider doing so. We're trying to get to that 3K mark before the end of the year. If you have, I thank you immensely. And with that being said, I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much.